You are live.
Okay. Thank you all. This is February 23rd, and we are here in a meeting of the Senate Rules Committee. And the reason why I felt like we needed to call this committee meeting is because of the issue of coming up against the governor's announcement about the extension of the emergency. I know that the House is going to be meeting in their Rules Committee meeting to discuss continuing to work remotely. And so I know from speaking with Secretary Blumer that as a Senate Rules Committee, we don't actually need to rule on continuing to meet within a remote environment. But I wanted Secretary Blumer to give you an understanding of why that is, why the House actually needs to have a formal vote and why we don't, so that there is complete understanding between the two chambers. So if I could turn it over to Secretary Blumer to give us the reason why that is.
Thank you, Senator. You've taken a different approach. What I like to think is a better approach here. You did it into the permanent rules. This current January, you adopted a permanent rule that permits during a declared emergency that you as the Rules Committee can determine whether committees meet remotely and whether your Senate chamber meets remotely. And as long as that emergency order is in effect, you can decide whether to meet remotely or in person. The House has taken a different approach. The House has taken an approach where they actually are passing sort of continuing resolutions for the times that they will be remote. And that's a different approach, and one that requires them to meet again. Back in December, pass another resolution. Back in December, when the various Rules Committee and Joint Rules were meeting to try to plan this coming session, the Senate and the House and the Joint Rules sort of talked about having everything be remote through town meeting. The House, when they took their approach, passed a resolution, I believe the first week, which said they'll be remote till town meeting. That expires. They have really, my understanding, no choice but to pass another resolution. Their Rules Committee will be meeting today to discuss that and decide when they're planning to extend it to. You have, in my opinion, a much more flexible framework. The House will probably disagree, but from my perspective, there's a lot more that you have for flexibility. You could decide next week to come back, or 2 weeks, or you could decide to wait a number of weeks. But your resolution says as long as there is an emergency declaration, you as the Rules Committee can continue to authorize remote committee meetings and remote sessions. The only hitch, so that you know, is if for some reason you wanted to go and continue having remote sessions beyond a declared emergency, then you'd have to take an additional resolution that not only would you have to do, you could suggest it and sponsor it, but the Senate would have to pass as a whole. But that's the only inflexibility you have, is if the governor decides to shorten or to dissolve, that's not the right term, but dissolve the declared emergency, then to continue remoteness and remote, you would have to take some action. So you don't have to do anything. I mean, I think it's from the Secretary's office position, the better you signal as to what your intentions are for the Senate, the better for all the senators for planning purposes. And as I say, the House, I believe, is looking at extending theirs at least through April. I don't know the exact date, maybe into May. And so when I was speaking with the pro tem, it's also probably a good idea for you guys to have a discussion so that there aren't senators wondering, are we coming back in the end of March, or are we coming back in April? So in that sense, the meeting was sort of, from our perspective, twofold. One, to give you background as to why you didn't have to pass a resolution, but to also allow you as the Senate Rules Committee to have a discussion as to when you thought you would be, or how long you'd be staying remote.
Okay.
Senator Mazza.
Is there a deadline of when we're adjourning, a definite date? So, and not, this is not the year to go beyond. Is there a time like May 1st, or what is set in stone?
We have not set a date yet. We're working within the usual structure, which is, looking at the second week in May. That's basically what we're playing with now. But the Speaker and I have not settled on a date yet. Senator Clarkson and then Senator Hooker.
Thanks. I mean, so much of what we're doing this session will depend on what the feds do. Normally, we budget for 18 weeks, and that would take us to mid-May. But I think we obviously have to be flexible. My sense is right now that we need to do nothing, right? And we will continue, and we will make a decision depending a further unfoldings. But that at the moment we need to do nothing and just signal to the House that we're doing nothing and we're continuing to meet remotely, at least for as long as, it's into the foreseeable future. Right?
Yes, and so, I mean, that was part of the conversation that the secretary and I had, which was, to what extent are we as a Senate Rules Committee just imagining that as long as the governor keeps extending the emergency order, we're going to be working remotely? And if at some point in the spring, the governor decides to rescind the order, which I do not think is likely, then we would have to decide whether to continue working remotely because it's tied to the rule.
Right.
So, Senator Hooker?
So what's the date now for the extension? I'm sorry, is it April or May?
You're saying
the governor's extension.
To March 15th? Is that where we will?
Or is it March or April?
It's a great question. I was assuming it was just to March at this point.
Yeah.
Do you know, Randy?
I don't know.
I think we should clarify it, but it doesn't impact our work today. We should just know it.
Right. And because, as the secretary said, if we're going to go beyond that, then we need to make some statement or take
Right.
a vote on that. But I can't remember the days. Just
It looks like to March 13th.
March 13. Okay.
Oh, no, that's last year.
Yeah, that was last year. It'll be a year.
I apologize. I just assumed it was the 15th, but
I didn't know if he had said something beyond that to April, but I'm not sure.
We can clarify that. We should be able to clarify that quickly.
right. And so then the question is, do we as a Senate Rules Committee want to propose, and we don't have to decide this now, but this is what I'm thinking. Do we want to propose to the chamber, just so for planning purposes, people know that we will be working as a Senate remote until the end of our usual session in May, and we can figure out how we wordsmith it. But so that's what I want you to think about is, do we want to go there so that people know that, or are people comfortable with just keeping it tied to month to month, or, emergency order to emergency order? I am open to the thinking of this group. I don't have an agenda here. I want it to be most comfortable for our senators. Yes, Senator Brock.
I think that what our statement might be what we anticipate, thereby leaving the possibility of change. But based on everything we know right now, we anticipate that we're going to be operating remotely for the remainder of the session, and that the session is likely to end at our usual ending date. Now, all of that, though, is subject to changes such as the state of the executive order, the state of the disease, and also what our federal partners do, and
Right.
more information will be forthcoming.
Right.
Perfect.
I think we should avoid, though, what we talked about earlier in this meeting of saying that based on where we are, we're going to do nothing. We've been
Yes,
accused
right.
of that quite frequently by the public. I don't think we want to reinforce that.
I agree, Randy. I was thinking the same thing. I don't know if we want to put it that way.
No, I didn't mean that. I
I
just
know.
meant we didn't have to make a decision today. I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's important for the body to know, have some parameters, because this is not going to be easy transitioning back to Montpelier. People are
Right.
going to have places to stay. They're going to have to, make
Right.
those arrangements. So
Right.
if we have something that says we're planning to
We
go to
anticipate-
the end of the session, That would be good.
I think Randy's statement, I think that's absolutely spot on, Randy.
Secretary Bloomer, anything else that you feel like we should discuss here as I have these hardworking folks with me this morning?
The only other thing I'd mention, and it may not be today, we either today or tomorrow, we'll be introducing the standard crossover resolution. And so that the members of the Rules Committee know, that means that any bills that don't make those 2 crossover dates as agreed to by the joint rules would be referred into this committee. And then you have the ability to move those, whether they be House bills or Senate bills forward. Those 2 crossover dates were set by the joint rules last week. The dates are in your calendar. It's the Friday after town meeting for substantive committees, and the Friday after that for the Rule 31 referrals. And so you may start seeing, after that's passed, we would have it read the first time and put on the calendar for action the next day. That may happen this morning. It's a little different, so I haven't spoken to the pro tem directly up on the floor about that yet, nor the lieutenant governor. And if we have it all ready to go, we'll do it today. And if not, we'll do it tomorrow, and then it would be up for action on Thursday. But I just wanted to give you a heads up that we have drafted the standard one, which means that after the crossover dates, you'll have to meet every now and then to consider bills that will be in your Rules Committee.
Okay. Anything else? Just wanted to keep you informed, since I knew that the House Rules Committee meeting would probably appear in some way in the paper, since they're making a decision. I didn't want anyone to be confused about why we also weren't needing to make a similar resolution. Yes, Allison. Oh, sorry, Senator.
So I would support having a complimentary statement from the pro tem's office
Mhm.
saying exactly what Randy said. So
Yes.
that no report is without a piece about what the Senate's planning.
Exactly. I agree.
And is there a possibility of informing the rest of the Senate? I mean, how would that take place? Would it
Right,
be
so
on the floor,
I'll
or-
craft a statement based on what Senator Brock said. I thought that was very well put, and then get that out to senators through Carolyn from the pro tem's office.
Okay.
All right. Wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. See you on the floor.